The rumble of a train rolling over iron tracks echoes into the grey air, while the chimneys of Paris breathe out their slow, smoky sighs. In the second half of the 19th century, Europe moved like a restless machine, pulling everyone into a tide of speed, noise, and endless replication. After the Industrial Revolution, profit became the heartbeat of society, urging people to run faster and faster, as if humanity had to match the rhythm of the engines. Yet in the middle of all this urgency, a few souls quietly paused. They held their brushes as if holding a fragile truth, wondering, with a kind of tender stubbornness, when the world is filled with things that can be copied without end, where can we place the longing for something truly, deeply, beautifully unique? Though they never met, they answered that question with the same gentle spirit. These three were Alphonse Mucha, George Auriol, and Maurice Pillard Verneuil. Editor Nicolas studied their works again and again, and now brings them back to our eyes and to our hearts. Mucha, painting the warmth of daily life into every strand of hair. Mucha, now seen as the luminous face of Art Nouveau, is still cherished as a national treasure of the Czech Republic. He was not born into the glamour of Paris. He grew up in a small Czech town, poor in money but rich in tenderness. As a young man, he could rarely gather enough coins to purchase pigments, but he always carried a sketchbook close to his body, as if it were an extension of his heart. He sketched the folds of his mother's scarf, the drifting dust caught in a beam of sunlight, the softened hands of neighbors after a day of labor. Anything that carried human warmth, he longed to capture, line by delicate line, as though documenting the small miracles that hold a life together. In the winter of 1894, opportunity arrived quietly, almost shyly. At the time he was working odd jobs in a printing house. Someone approached him to create a poster for Sarah Bernhardt's play Gismonda. That night, the printing house was nearly silent. Only one lamp glowed faintly. Its light touched his tired hands as he worked, and slowly, the woman under his brush came alive. Her hair curved with gentle movement, her eyelashes shimmered like morning dew, and the folds of her dress seemed wrapped in a soft, breathing light. When the poster appeared on the streets of Paris a few days later, people stopped in their tracks. They stared at the woman on the paper, unable to look away. They realized that art did not need to stay locked inside grand halls. It could belong to everyday life. It could remind people of how life ought to feel. From that moment, Mucha became a symbol of the era. But he never tried to place himself on a pedestal. The women he painted were tender as blossoms, warm as ordinary afternoons, each radiant with her own personality. They looked like earthly goddesses of nature, surrounded by flowers, vines, and starlit halos. His lines were smooth as silk, his colors soft as dreams, and his circular and arched compositions carried a sense of shelter and eternity. This living, blooming vitality made his art sweep across Europe like spring arriving early. Auriol, the poet who made letters sing. Auriol was a wanderer of cafes, a gentle idler who lived between cups of coffee and scraps of poetry. By day he wrote playful lines for small theaters, and by night he designed book covers for friends. His pockets often held half-crumpled pieces of paper filled with short phrases, and sometimes he would lose himself staring at a single letter on a menu. He was not a wealthy man, but he lived as though each day carried a melody only he could hear, soft and a little wistful. From this quiet music grew his typeface, Alphabet Auriol. It refused rigid shapes and square corners. Instead, its strokes bent softly, like the warm night breeze drifting through the streets of Montmartre. Long before him, in the solemn Middle Ages, Europeans had already decorated letters for illuminated manuscripts. But at that time, reading and writing were privileges guarded by the powerful. By the era after the Industrial Revolution, literacy rose, art spread, and letters themselves became part of everyday life. On this foundation, Auriol's artistic alphabet was born, not a lonely, distant craft, but something accessible, tender, and full of breath. His designs were not grand in scale like Mucha's. They were intimate, rhythmic, and full of personality. He fused text and imagery, creating a visual melody. Some complained that his letters looked improper. He smiled, because he believed letters should carry the warmth of living. They should sound like the crisp clink of glasses in a cafe, or the quiet confessions written on late-night envelopes, not the rigid letterblocks unchanged since medieval times. He never wanted to change the world. He simply believed that lines should be alive, and letters should have souls. In a way, he was doing exactly what we still do today, searching for a small corner of self-expression in a world filled with sameness. Verneuil, the gentle order borrowed from nature. Compared with the splendor of Mucha or the lyrical charm of Auriol, Verneuil's world was a whisper. He rarely stepped into busy streets. Instead, he crouched in gardens like a patient listener. He held a magnifying glass to follow the branching veins of petals. He took home seashells to study their spirals. He counted the soft fuzz on feathers one by one. He was, in every sense, a quiet and devoted observer of nature. He transformed plants into a visual language of geometry and ornamentation. Seaweed, shells, and flowers became patterns, each given a new rhythm and order. He liked to say, "The order of beauty has always existed in nature. We only need to pick it up gently." This echoed the way mathematicians search for the sacred rules of the universe. So he turned the delicate curl of a rose into geometric curves. He painted the spiral of a shell onto ceramics. He wove fern leaves into tablecloths. These designs did not aim to astonish. They simply fit. On a table they did not overshadow a meal. On a wall they did not dim the sunlight. On a cup they made even a sip of water feel quietly delightful. Through his lines, Verneuil told us that rationality is not cold. Order can have tenderness. Beauty does not always need to shout. It can whisper and still be unforgettable. Their tenderness was the softest form of resistance. These three individuals never crossed paths. One came from a small Czech town. One lived among cafe tables. One spent his days listening to the language of leaves. Yet they all worked toward the same gentle purpose, offering a soft, warm cloth to a world overwhelmed by speed and mass production. They never raised banners or formed movements. They simply breathed through their lines. Mucha gave daily life a sense of quiet faith. Auriol gave letters their own voices. Verneuil gave order a soft heartbeat. Together, they brought art down from the unreachable heights of grand halls, placing it gently into everyday life, into a mother's scarf, a cafe menu, a cup held in ordinary hands. Their art was not an escape from reality. It was a tender way to mend it. They helped the world become a little softer, a little kinder, a little more human. And in doing so, they answered the spiritual hunger of ordinary people during the rising productivity of the 19th century. And today, we still meet these breathing lines. More than 1 century has passed. We no longer wait at street corners for posters to appear. Yet when we turn the pages of an art book, we still meet Mucha's women, smiling within flowers, their hair carrying the golden light of long-ago mornings. When we type on our computers, design software still offers Auriol's fonts, whose strokes seem to hum softly. And on the tablecloths and cups in our homes, we may find Verneuil's patterns quietly borrowed from nature, keeping us company as we eat and drink. These lines never became specimens of a forgotten past. They carry a simple, enduring truth. No matter how fast or loud the world becomes, something should still be made slowly. Some warmth must still come from nature, untouched by machines. As we scroll through endless streams of information, our fingers gliding across the cold glow of screens, we may suddenly remember these three artists. And we may remember the soft, breathing lines they left behind. Their beauty has never been a past tense. It reminds us that giving care to a meal, a sheet of paper, or a fleeting moment is one of the gentlest responses we can offer to life. And the love hidden within those lines will stay with us, helping us hold on to a little sweetness, a little slowness, in a world that never stops moving. Finally, if you found warmth or inspiration in these stories, you're gently invited to follow my YouTube channel, a small space dedicated to art and art history, where we continue exploring beauty with the same softness and curiosity that these artists once offered the world.